Good afternoon and good morning, everyone, and welcome to our November Science Club. I'm Tian Lee, Junior Project Manager at Science and Technology Office of Embassy of Switzerland in Seoul. We are part of the SwissNext Network outpost aimed at connecting Switzerland with the world's innovation hubs. Science Club highlights the Swiss-Korean cooperation in diverse fields of studies. We organize the Science Club generally in the embassy. However, because of the COVID outbreak and current social distancing measures, we switched it to a digital version, which actually offers the opportunity to be connected with our partners in Switzerland. So it's our pleasure to welcome you all here. Today's Science Club will start soon with two speakers, Dr. Jin-Soo Kim from University of Zurich and PhD candidate Ms. Suwan Park from Pohang University of Science and Technology. First, I'd like to introduce Dr. Jin-Soo Kim. Dr. Kim, please turn on your camera and say hello to our audience.
Hello.
Dr. Kim is a senior researcher at the Department of Evolutionary Biology and Environmental Studies, University of Zurich. His main research interest is Earth system modeling, and he has published papers mainly about the interactions between terrestrial ecosystem and climate variabilities, such as atmospheric teleconnection impacts on the terrestrial carbon cycle and large-scale fire activity. His research proposal with University of Zurich was actually selected for the Young Researchers Exchange Program between Korea and Switzerland during his PhD years. And this research proposal received Minister's Award for Excellence and its outstanding performance. Our second speaker is PhD candidate Ms. Suwan Park. Ms. Park, please turn on your camera and say hello to our audience.
Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you.
Ms. Park is currently a PhD student at the Division of Environmental Science and Engineering, Pohang University of Science and Technology. Her main research interests include terrestrial biogeochemical processes and its feedback, especially in Pan-Arctic region. Also, she has been researching the impacts of plant physiological response to increasing CO2 on climate system and on the interaction between land carbon cycle and large-scale atmospheric variability. We also have Professor Gabriela Schaffman-Strupp from University of Zurich with us here today. Professor, please, Gabriela, please turn on your camera and say hello to our audience.
Hello, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here today. So about 20 years ago, when the SwissNext office in Boston opened, I was there to celebrate. I was still a PhD student at this point, and I'm really pleased to be here now at another SwissNext event today with you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. She is a co-director of the Zurich University Research Priority Program on global climate, global change, and biodiversity. And she is interested in the role of the changing biosphere in the Arctic system. With her team, she investigates plant strategies and diversity in Arctic ecosystems. As an academic advisor of Dr. Kim, Gabriela will join us for the discussion session today. Now, before giving the floor to our first speaker, I'd like to ask our participants to write their questions during the presentation by using the Q&A section in Zoom. If there are any technical issues or technical problems, please only use the chat function here so that we could reach you out and help you out as soon as possible. At the end of the two presentations, we'll begin the Q&A discussion session and ask our speakers the questions for you. Now, please, Dr. Kim, the floor is yours.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, it's good.
Okay, let me start. My name is Jin-Soo Kim, who is a senior researcher at the University of Zurich. And I really appreciate it to the FT office to give me an opportunity having a presentation today for Swiss Korean Science Club. Today, I'd like to introduce the Siberian fires linked to greenhouse gas warming. So here you can see a lot of fires in Siberia. Actually, this is the NASA the satellite image on the 28th July 2019, 1 year ago, and you can see here lots of the fire-induced smoke in nearby Yakutsk region. Actually, it is the Gabriela's field sites, and this is a satellite image in the 2019. Here you can see lots of the fire-induced smoke, and Russian authorities reported that 3 million hectares were on fire at the time. That is an area roughly the size of the Belgium, very huge area. So 2019 was a record-breaking event. However, left shows the fire activity in a normal year in gray. So gray, you can see very small amount, right, in summertime. But 2019 in yellow. So yellow, this has a lot of the fire events. However, the red means the 2020, this year's fire activity. Even though the 2019 was the record-breaking event, but this year also had record-breaking fires, especially in the Arctic Circle region. The Arctic Circle means this very high latitude region, right? So, and also this region contains many peatlands, which has a very dense carbon in there. I will show later more about that. And many of South Korean people know that this year actually we have very long rainy season, 장마 season, as related to the Siberian heat wave and record-breaking fire event here. You may remember that this year's 장마, the rainy season in South Korea was exceptionally long and strong due to the high temperature in the Arctic and blocking events in the northern region of the Korea Peninsula. So I think, South Korea and then this Siberia also located in the same longitude. So it is very important to the understanding the Siberian fire events and heat wave in terms of the understanding South Korea's climate system also. So I and Professor Jong Sung Kook and Professor Gabriela Shipmastrop and other colleagues published a scientific paper for the Siberian fires in Science Advances in early 2020. I will briefly introduce the deep research today about the Siberian fire study. But before that, this research was started 3 years ago when I visited the University of Zurich as an exchange program between the Korean and Switzerland. So FTOP for the announced Young Researchers Exchange Program between Switzerland and Korea. Actually, it was 4 years ago, and I applied it, and my proposal was selected. So I can visit the University of Zurich 3 years ago. At that starting point, I could publish a research paper and got a senior scientist job at the University of Zurich since the last April. So this is a background of this study, and left figure shows mean burnt air fraction, which means the burnt area by fire during the last 20 years based on satellite observation. You can see there are two hotspots for in terms of the fire activity. One is in the Central Asia, and another one is the southeastern Siberia region. Actually, for the Central Asia region, it's mainly due to the agricultural fire. Like every year they seed some crops, and then when they cut the crops, they just let the fire on the ground. But for Siberian fire, southeastern Siberia fire, actually it has a dense taiga forest and also a permafrost region. Permafrost region is like hatched region, and and you can see the left graph, you can see the seasonal cycle of the fire, and you can see actually fire occurs majority in the April and May. It is the boreal springtime. Autumn also has some fire events, but very small. So actually, the fire season is in the April and May, and this region is mostly composed by the larch forest. Very beautiful forest, I think. But when autumn, in autumn, the leaf makes some the little fall, and then this little fall make some fire, and then the fire can be spread out on the ground to the little fall by little fall in this region. Actually, yeah, to understand the interannual variation of the fire activity, I analyzed the fire-related atmospheric pattern, because the previous study argued that large-scale atmospheric variation, such as Arctic oscillation, drives the large fire in boreal region. As a result, I also found that Arctic oscillation like pattern is driven in Arctic oscillation. Actually, I'm not sure you know the Arctic oscillation is called Bukguk Jindong in South Korea, and the Arctic oscillation is characterized by the negative pressure in the Arctic region, but high pressure in the middle latitude, and then sometimes if the negative and positive, sometimes the reversely, like positive, negative, and then like a seaflow, it can be thin in the Arctic system. And I found that when we have this pattern, then it has a high temperature, this region in the winter time, February and March. And I already told you the fire season in the April, May, right? So somewhat when we have this pattern in the winter time, then after that, 2 months later, we will have the more fire in Siberian region. So actually, in order to understanding this lagging process between the atmosphere condition and fire, we have the 2-month lag. I also analyzed the snow cover variability with respect to the fire activity. But you can see, like in February, even though the temperature is very high, but snow is not much melted, because the climatological snow is about the 100%. And then snow has very big depth, so something like a frozen. So even though we have the heat wave in winter time, but snow cover will not be shrinking. But after that, the March and April, we have a lot of the snow melting by Arctic oscillation pattern. And then, like this is the snow melting. And then after that, we will have many fire events like this. So that's why we have the 1 or 2 month time lag between the atmospheric pattern to boreal regions, the fire events, something like that. So that's all what I did. But actually, today I'd like to emphasize Arctic systems, ongoing change in the Arctic system, because the Arctic is changing by ice albedo feedback. It is very well-known feedback. You may heard about when we have the temperature rise due to the CO2 increase, but it also melted down the sea ice or snow cover, and the white color can be reflect many solar radiation, even for the polar bear. Polar bear also has a white color, and then they can reflect many solar radiation. But when we have the melted sea ice snow cover, then ocean can contain and absorb the many solar radiation, and it can bring the additional temperature rise. So it has some positive feedback between the ice albedo, right? So as boreal fire climate feedback, I'd like to introduce the boreal fire climate feedback. When we have greenhouse gas warming, such as CO2 or methane, then it can be make some earlier snow melt. the spring will be come earlier and earlier, and then snow will be melt earlier and earlier and earlier, and it can be have more fire because when we have the snow melted ground, then it can be lots of the lithophore on the ground. Then when people just let the fire, such as a cigarette or any electric some events, then it can be easily spread out in terms of the fire spreading, right? And fire is the one of the fastest mechanism to emit CO2 to atmosphere, right? So carbon emission occur, and this carbon emission also is kinds of the greenhouse gas forcing. So it has a positive feedback, right? So it's a big matter in the future climate projection, I think. And also the Siberian region composed by the peatland, I already told you, and the permafrost. Actually, those are store lots of the carbon and methane. So here you can see the ground is burning because of this ground is composed by peatland, has a very dense carbon in at the top of the ground. And you can see this figure shows like a tree in the air, but actually this region already composed by the peatland. And when we have the peatland burning, then it's something like bonded by fire, then it shows something like a tree in the air. But so that's why the peatland fire is the very important issue in the greenhouse gas emission, right? And also, you may heard about the methane is one of the strong greenhouse gas. So it's 25 times stronger than the CO2 actually. And then when you turn on the lights or fire on the permafrost region, and then it can be made from these kinds of fire because they have a lot of methane under the ground. So when we have the reduced snow cover and then permafrost dew, then it can be made from the lots of the methane emission, but we don't know much yet. But anyway, this peatland permafrost is very important in carbon cycle and also future climate projections. So I'm not sure, have you ever been to the Pohang in South Korea? Maybe Gabriela don't visit to the Pohang yet, but please visit the Garden of Fire in Pohang actually. As like a previous picture, you can find a continuous fire by natural gases in Pohang, and actually it is since 2017, but continuously burning because there's lots of the natural gases. So like this, these kinds of the grounded natural gases and methane is very has a very big potential to the greenhouse gas warming. So let's sum up, and thank you for your attention actually. And I'd like to introduce my work at the University of Zurich at the last part. So I'm teaching in the Earth System Modeling course, which is the mandatory course for the master degree in Earth System Science. And I'm involved in the spatial ecology and remote sensing group of the Professor Gabriela Schiffman stuff. And if you are interested in the climate vegetation feedback, or Earth system modeling and boreal fire, tundra fire, or even like a field study in Siberia, please contact me or Gabriela. And here you can see my email address and Gabriela's email address. And if you have any question for the working or studying in Switzerland, also you can ask me or Gabriela. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Kim. And now the floor is yours, Ms. Park. Ms. Park, you can start sharing your screen.
Can you see my presentation PPT?
Yep.
Okay, let's start. Okay, good morning and good afternoon. I'm Suwan Park and the speaker from Korean side. I'm glad to share about the latest collaborative research between Korea and Switzerland. Thank you for giving me the chance.
Ms. Park, sorry to interrupt, but could you also turn on your camera, please?
Oh, okay. Okay. And thank you for giving me the chance to present in Science Club. And I will skip, and thank you for the nice introduction. And I'm doing my PhD course in PostTech. I'm in the Climate System Laboratory. Our lab studies about the climate system. The climate system is the highly complex global system consisting of 5 major components and the interactions between them. My research interests include biosphere and atmosphere interaction, and especially in Pan-Arctic region. Also, I have been working on carbon cycle and its feedback. Recently, these have become one of the most important topics in climate change research. When I entered the graduate school in 2018, I met my advisor, Professor Jong-sung Cook, and Dr. Jin-Soo Kim for the first time. Dr. Jin-Soo Kim helped me a lot as a mentor for a year before he moved to Switzerland. Thanks to Dr. Jin-Soo Kim, I was able to quickly adapt to my graduate school life and learned a lot about the research. After he had gone, we are still keeping in touch for the collaborative research through a video conference and on email. Through this collaboration, recently we published 2 papers in journals. So in today's presentation, I'm going to briefly talk about our research that published in Nature Communications, the intensification of Arctic warming as a result of CO2 physiological forcing. First of all, I will briefly introduce the research background. This is a graph of accumulation of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere based on the continuous measurements from 1958 to the present day, called Killing Curve. CO2 concentration already surpassed 410 ppm due to anthropogenic emission. Warming, because CO2 as a greenhouse gas can enhance greenhouse effect. This figure shows the change in global surface temperature. The Earth has already warmed about 1 degree Celsius. In high latitude, especially in Arctic Ocean, temperature has increased rapidly than the global average. As CO2 increases, not only the greenhouse effect, but also plant physiological state changes. Through the stomata, pores on the leaves, plants absorb CO2 for the photosynthesis. At the same time, water is lost, which is called the process transpiration. As CO2 increases, plants partially close their stomata to prevent water loss, because plants can easily uptake CO2 under higher CO2 levels. You would have felt cool if you sprayed water on the floor in the summer. This is due to the evaporative cooling effect. Thus, this plant stomatal response to CO2 can induce surface warming by reducing surface cooling effect. This effect has been confirmed through the phase experiments in cropland. CO2 is elevated to 500 ppm only at these restricted regions. We can see the surface warming due to plant physiological response to increasing CO2. To investigate the impacts of plants' physiological effect on climate system, we utilized the Earth system model. Earth system models can simulate the interactions between climate systems and allow evaluate the climate state under different conditions. We used the datasets provided by the CIMIC project, which was created for the comparison of climate models between different research institutions around the world. Using an experiment in which CO2 increases 1% per year for 104 years from pre-industrial level to cutoff leveling, we evaluate the only physiological effect, excluding greenhouse effect, at about 820 ppm when the CO2 was almost doubled compared to the current level. This figure shows the significant changes in evapotranspiration and temperature. Because an evaporative cooling effect declines, land surface warming occurs. Interesting point is that significant warming also occurs in Arctic Ocean, where vegetation obviously does not exist. So we further examine how does vegetation trigger Arctic warming. The responsible mechanism is a poleward heat transport. The atmosphere transferred heat energy from the equator to the poles to dissipate the surplus of energy at equator. The excessive energy at high latitudes due to plant's response is transported to the Arctic Ocean through this process. This is the time latitude figure for temperature change. X-axis is month, y-axis is latitude. The continental warming in summer seems to propagate it to the pole with time. Increased poleward transport triggered by closing of stomata can limitedly induce Arctic warming through this process. Another intriguing point is that delayed Arctic warming is comparable with continental warming in the magnitude. This can be explained by the climate feedback in the Arctic Ocean. Dr. Jin Kim already said the feedback is the process that may amplify or diminish the initial forcing. In Arctic Ocean, sea ice exists. This reflects sunlight, thereby cooling the Earth's surface. Since increased poleward energy transport melts sea ice, more sunlight absorbed at the surface, thereby accelerating warming rate. This figure shows the changes in sea ice and albedo caused by plant stomata effect. Albedo is a fraction of light that is reflected by a surface. Decreased albedo means more sunlight is absorbed at the surface. Since increased heat energy melts sea ice, more sunlight is observed at the surface, and this process accelerates Arctic warming. To sum up, positive sea ice albedo feedback can amplify the Arctic warming induced by physiological response. We also found that another positive feedback amplifies the land surface warming. Due to decreased transpiration, relative humidity also decreases over continents. This causes a reduction of cloud fraction over continent. So more solar radiation reaches to the surface, so surface temperature increases. So this cloud feedback additionally contributes to the continental warming. Due to these positive climate feedback processes, the climate change resulting from physiological effect is considerable. We quantitatively estimated the climate change resulting from physiological effect and positive feedbacks. Physiological effects account for 28% of continental warming in boreal summer and about 10% of annual Arctic warming by greenhouse effect. Arctic temperature will rise about 1 degree Celsius in winter. So we've demonstrated for the first time that plant physiological response to increasing CO2 can enhance earthwarming. So this result has an implication of the future climate projection, because a lot of climate models still do not include this vegetation effect. There is a possibility that the future warming is underestimated and global warming can be further accelerated. Thank you for your attention, and any questions and comments are welcome.
Thank you, Ms. Park, for your presentation. And okay, now let's move on to the Q&A discussion session. Since no question has been brought up until now, I would just like to remind all the audience that you could freely ask any questions to both of the speakers and also to Professor Gabriela in the Q&A function on their Zoom. Well, I have some questions for Dr. Kim first. So, could we say that there are any other climate feedbacks in the Arctic region that could also be found according to your research?
Yep, actually, it is the cover is the expert in the vegetation, the climate feedback, because recent Arctic has recently it is observed that Arctic is warming and greening, actually. So greening means the lots of the vegetation are grow well, because the Arctic is pan-Arctic region is the kinds of the temperature limited region, which has very low has a low temperature. But when we have warming, then the temperature increase makes from the plant growth, enhance the plant growth, and then this enhanced plant growth also take full radiation, because the vegetation has low albedo than the bare soil or snow, something like that. So greening also is kind of cause of the positive feedback in the Arctic system. So I would say like vegetation greening effect is very important to understand it, but still the modeling, Earth system modeling is not well captured the vegetation greening in the Arctic, so it is very challenging research part in the near future.
Okay, thank you for your explanation. And I also have another question for Ms. Park this time. Ms. Park, could you briefly elaborate why then Arctic warming takes place a few months after surface warming, not the other way around? What are some reasons behind the time difference? Okay.
There is a time lag between the land surface warming and Arctic warming. This is due to the sea ice albedo feedback and its seasonality. In summer, when continental warming is greatest, increased heat transport melt sea ice. Increased solar energy is accumulated in the Arctic Ocean, that increase the air surface. After the time, and with time, in colder season, ocean is much warmer than the atmosphere. So in this colder season, accumulated energy in the ocean is emitted to the atmosphere. So that's why there is a time lag between two.
Thank you, Ms. Park. And we have one question from Zazo Meish. Thank you for your question. It's for Ms. Park. He said that he was wondering how this effect would interact with the increased growth of plants under higher CO2 concentrations. So what do you think, Ms. Park?
As you said, in this experiment, the CO2 fertilization effect also included in this experiment. So under the higher CO2 levels, the the CO2 fertilization effect increase the photosynthesis rate, and this can enhance transpiration. And these stomata effects decrease transpiration, so conflict effect. but under the higher CO2 levels, almost 800 ppm, this stomatal effect is much greater than CO2 fertilization effect. So that's why the continental warming occurs due to stomatal effect, because this effect is much bigger than this CO2 fertilization effect. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. For just a simple note to the speakers, if you would like to use your PPT slides or further screen sharing, you can simply interrupt and start your screen sharing on your own. We have another question for Dr. Kim. It's from Mr. Konyel Kim. So Dr. Kim, how much is the quantitative amount of CO2 emitted from the boreal fire climate feedback? He thinks that it'll take strong positive effects. Is there any feedback well stimulated in this model?
Thank you for very nice question, because like every year the human-made carbon emission is about 10 petagram per year. 10 petagram is like petagram is like 10 to 12, very huge, like 1,000 gigaton every year. But the global fire has 2 petagram per year, and very huge. But however, you know, the Indonesian and Amazon fire and African fire has a lot of the carbon emission. But for the boreal fire, their percentage is very small, like few percent. But however, even though they have very small amount, but we need to understand the positive feedback between them, because I already told you that in boreal region we have the peatlands and permafrost. Actually, it has very big potential to making the global warming, but still we don't know yet how much it is. So that's why we need to have the Earth system modeling, but still Earth system model don't have the interaction between the fire and climate in terms of the carbon cycle. So even though the Earth system modeling has a fire scheme, but that carbon emission by fire not update to the atmospheric model, which means the atmospheric model don't have the additional effect from the fire. So it is big matter. So that is the another good opportunity and the research topic. So anyone who want to research a bit, please contact me. And I can also move to the Eun-Sang-jo's question. A quick question to Kim in terms of the water fire climate feedback. Do you think the earlier snow melt is also related to the wildfire in North America? For example, the California wildfire. Actually, yes, I think that, because another science paper published a few years ago says on the mountain in the California region, there's lots of the mountain, and then mountains, the snow also getting melted down earlier and earlier. Then when we have a lot of snowpack on the mountain, that it makes the continuous making the runoff, river flow to the ground region, and then it can provide many soil moisture until the summer. But when we have the earlier snow melting, like in early spring, then there's no snow, and then there's no supplier from the to soil moisture, which means it can be easily dry out, and then it can be made from more fires. And also, I heard that the heat wave in summertime also make from the dieback in the forest. So tree will be died by like mega heat wave, and then it can be made from like berries on the ground, and then it can be a fear of the fire, something like that. And finally, I also have another question from the Jajo. Any specific way that we could predict the fire and use this information to fight the fire? Yeah, actually, that is very wonderful question, because I already studied that fire season is the April and May, right? but atmospheric pattern, the exceptional atmospheric pattern exists in the February and March, then we can have we will have a big fire in the when we have the Arctic oscillation pattern, which means when we know the winter times climate conditions, such as like February and March, when we have the positive Arctic oscillation pattern, then we can also make some the alarm to the local citizen, like, oh, we will have a very big temperature rise and earlier snow melt, so you will get a more fire the 2 months later. So please be careful, and or please make a fire policy, strict fire policy, something like that. So I think that is wonderful. And but also in the longer time period, like it is expected earlier snow melting in the longer time period, and also global warming in longer time period. So it is expected getting more fire in the near future, right? So we can argue that, like, to the local government to build up the new fire policy, or like strict the fire policy, something like that. For example, in China, even though I make from the box with the northern China border, but lots of the fire occurred in Russia, not in China, because China has a very strict fire policy. So that's why they don't have a lot of fire, actually, because the 80% of the fire is to come from the human activity, like a cigarette or electricity events, or like something like that. So we need to also say something using the science, and then we can alarming, and we can do like please be careful, something like that. And okay, and I have another question finally. And can you describe the main distinctions and strong points of your research methodology to for the extensive fire in area of Siberian? So actually I can show you once again for my PPT file. And so so here you can see actually, I just used a very common method, like taking the regression, correlation, just linear statistical method to the investigating the how Arctic oscillation induce the high temperature and earlier snow melt and fire, something like that. But actually, many people just focusing on the very boreal region's fire, not in this region's fire. But I just focus on this region because it has a lot of burnt area compared to any other regions in globe. So I just pick up this area, but even though the boreal region is the very has very small amount of the burnt area, but I think that is very important. I already told you, like they have peatlands, high fraction of the peatlands, and the permafrost region also. So, but actually you can find out my paper, but the methodology is the very simple, like just taking the regression, correlation. But I think even though we can calculate the very easy way, but the making the storyline from the AO pattern to earlier snow melt and fire is the very interesting, I think. So yeah, that's it. And actually, but this data just come from the global fire emission database. the GFET data set, and it is also based on the MODIS fire data. So it's very common use data, and then you can easily find out in online. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Kim. And I
Yeah.
also have one simple question for Ms. Park. I think this kind of relates to what Zazo Amaze previously asked, but it is commonly said that we should plant more trees to prevent global warming. However, I first had an impression that this doesn't necessarily seem so according to your presentation because of plants' physiological response to increasing CO2. Would planting trees be necessarily accelerating global warming in the long run, or because of any other reasons such as transpiration, we cannot say that? What do you think? What's your opinion about it, Ms. Park?
Okay, I will share my PPT. Okay. Yes, as you say, the vegetation uptake about 20% of anthropogenic emission from the atmosphere. This is the figure for the summary of a global carbon cycle. This amount is the anthropogenic emission, and this land carbon uptake. This land carbon uptake dampen the greenhouse effect, and this perspective is related to the carbon cycle. So this carbon cycle is related to biochemical processes. In addition, CO2 can enter the plant physiology and thus affect the surface energy flux and hydrology. And this is the biophysical effect. In this experiment, we first use the models with prescribed CO2 levels. Thus, we just evaluate this biophysical effect under the elevated CO2 levels, not biochemical processes. So plant physiological effect can intensify global warming due to its biophysical effect. So vegetation has a double side effect, so we must, it is important to understand their relative magnitudes.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Park. And I would like to also ask Professor Gabriela for some of your feedback or any of your opinions about this research or about the cooperation between Switzerland and Korea, please.
Yes, so thank you very much. I think it's really exciting to see so much research happening also in South Korea around the polar areas and especially the Arctic in this place here. And of course, also in Switzerland, there is quite a lot of climate research around these topics, especially also in terms of the climate of the carbon cycle. It is of course very important, as someone just said, to really include all the different kind of feedbacks and not only the carbon feedback, especially if we talk about the boreal forest, where the albedo feedback through snow and trees can counteract, or in most cases is counteracting, the effect of the CO2 capture by the vegetation. There was this paper from, where also Swiss-based researchers were included that said that we could plant trees all over the world and fight climate change, but this of course did not really take into account the biophysical feedbacks, and this was neglected, and we have to include that in order to really provide mitigation strategies that are effective. And then the second part as well, what we should not forget, so of course we look into climate feedbacks, but we also have to consider biodiversity effects. And if we lose biodiversity, we might actually have another climatic feedback by reduced productivity if the system becomes so monospecific that actually it's not resistant anymore to beetle outbreak, to any kind of other biological disturbances. So we have also to include biological feedbacks and not only CO2 or albedo feedbacks.
Awesome, thank you for your explanation, a further explanation. And if there are no other question or feedbacks from the audience, I would like to conclude, bring this science club to an end. Before concluding, all the speakers, please turn on your camera and smile. We'll take a screenshot for the memory. So 1, 2, 3, and smile. Okay, perfect. Thank you everyone for attending our November Science Club. If you have any questions or suggestions, please feel free to contact us at sol.science@eda.admin.ch. The email address is on the screen right now. And you can scan the red QR code to visit our STO website for any upcoming information or upcoming events. And also, please scan the blue QR code and follow us on LinkedIn for the most recent updates. Thank you all, and see you all next time in our next Science Club. Bye-bye.